Court now calls Jordan Street versus Reese Taylor. What says the plaintiff? Are you ready to proceed?
We're ready to proceed, Your Honor.
What says the defendant?
We're ready to proceed, Your Honor. Yes.
All right. Are there any pretrial matters from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Before we get into our pretrial matters, may we state our appearances?
You may.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Olivia Dworkin, and I, along with my co-counsel, Brendan Flynn.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We represent the plaintiff in today's case, Miss Jordan Street. And we do have some housekeeping matters to attend to, but would defense like to state appearances before we get into that?
Proceed, defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Aisling Fitzpatrick on behalf of the defendant, Miss Reese Taylor. I'm with my co-counsel, Miss Carolyn McGuigan.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Plaintiff, proceed with any of your pretrial matters.
Yes, Your Honor. As this is our first time in a Zoom courtroom, may we assume that we have permission to move freely about the room so long as we stay within the confines of the screen?
Correct.
And as we may need to publish exhibits for yourself and for the other witnesses involved, is it okay to assume that we may do that via a screen share during trial?
You may.
And furthermore, Your Honor, I just wanted to draw your attention to certain exhibits that we have deemed are pre-admitted. That's exhibits 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21.
Correct.
And then I believe that's all we had for pretrial matters, Your Honor. If opposing counsel has any pretrial matters they'd like to attend to before we get into our motions.
Defense.
No pretrial matters, Your Honor, before we get into motions.
What motions do we have?
Your Honor, at this time, we would like to move to enter Exhibit 3. It's a photograph of Rory Street. I did discuss this with Ms. Fitzpatrick before trial today. I don't believe that we have any issues with this exhibit.
No objections to this, Your Honor.
Okay. 3 is admitted.
Furthermore, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would move to exclude Exhibit 12 from evidence. We also discussed this before trial as well.
Does the defense have?
Your Honor, that's correct. We have no objections to that.
Okay. So 12, the handwritten note shall not
Yes,
be
Your Honor.
in evidence. Anything further?
No, Your Honor. With that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Defense have any motions?
Yes, Your Honor. On agreement with opposing counsel, we've agreed to preclude any mention of a subsequent remedial remedy that the defendant did in this case, pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 407, and that is on consent by both parties.
Is that correct, plaintiff?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay.
And further, Your Honor, we seek to exclude any mention of a prior incident involving Coach Taylor, the defendant in this case, that happened over 6 years ago at a different high school unrelated to this matter. We move to exclude this pursuant to Federal Rule of Evidence 404, as it is improper character evidence.
Does plaintiff have a response?
We're okay with that, Your Honor, so long as defense doesn't open the door to this line of testimony.
If in fact you believe that the door has been opened, you will need to make sure that is clear to the court.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Anything further?
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
All right. Are we ready to proceed with opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, you may proceed with your opening statement.
May it please the court. I want to tell you about a girl named Rory Street. Rory was a bright young woman, loved by her friends and her family. In the fall of 2018, Rory began her senior year at Waco High School, a time normally filled with standardized tests, college applications, and teenage anxiety. Rory's high school career was defined by her love for soccer. She was the star forward for the varsity soccer team. Her coaches, friends, and teammates all raved about her talent, Division I scouters were always at her games trying to recruit her, and her teammates thought that she was a shoo-in for a D1 scholarship. Rory's future was shining. On September 7th, 2018, that future was taken away from her. While Rory was at soccer practice that day, she dropped dead. For you to understand why Rory Street died on that tragic day in September 2018, I need to introduce you to the defendant in today's case, Coach Reese Taylor. Now, Miss Taylor was Rory's soccer coach at Waco High School. And you'll hear that on the Waco High soccer team, you don't stop when you're tired. You don't stop when you're sick. You stop when Coach Taylor says stop. You'll hear today that on September 7th, 2018, in the Texas heat, Coach Taylor never said stop. You'll hear today that on September 7th, Miss Taylor decided to punish Rory for her performance at soccer practice that day. She ordered Rory to run a drill called Burma Road. Now, you're going to hear a lot about Burma Road today, so I want to make sure that we all understand what this entails. Burma Road is an exercise where the players have to run for 30 yards, dribble a ball for another 30 yards, and then bear crawl on their hands and their feet all the way back to the beginning for another 60 yards. Now, 60 yards, that's about half the length of an entire football field. Me, I probably couldn't even do that once. You hear that Rory didn't have to do this just once. Rory had to run Burma Road until Coach Taylor said stop. Now, Rory was tough, but you'll hear today that on that day, it was over 100 degrees, that Rory was not given any water breaks, nor was she given any time to rest or cool off. Instead, after Rory ran Burma Road on repeat, Miss Taylor decided to punish Rory even further, and punish her violently. After Rory ran on Burma Road, Coach Taylor called her back over to the main field, and she decided to implement a new challenge, something that she had never been tested before. You see, this new challenge, Miss Taylor had Rory line up on the yard with all of her teammates just 10 yards away from her. Coach Taylor said that whenever she was supposed to blow the whistle, Rory's teammates were supposed to run at her and tackle her to the ground, one at a time. Now, this isn't football where everyone has on pads and helmets and expects to get tackled to the ground. Rory was without pads, without protection, without defense. Now, during trial, you're going to hear a lot about these slide tackles. It's a move where a defensive player slides on the ground feet first to try to knock the ball away from the person who has it. And Ms. Fitzpatrick might tell you it's a very common move in soccer, and she'll be right. But the punishment that Coach Taylor implemented that day was something quite different. You see, Coach Taylor didn't order them to just practice slide tackling. Coach Taylor ordered the other players to continuously knock Rory down to the ground, time after time. She didn't switch out who was getting tackled. It was always Rory. And each time Rory slammed down to the ground, Coach Taylor ran over to Rory, grabbed her by the bottom of her jersey, and yanked her off the ground, only to do it again. You'll hear today that this didn't happen just once. It didn't stop after 5 tackles or 10 tackles. You'll hear that Coach Taylor ordered this to happen 15 times in a row. You'll hear that 15th time, Rory didn't get back up. She died right there on the field before the ambulance could even arrive. Now, it's because of this that Rory's mother, Jordan, is bringing a wrongful death action against the defendant. And in doing so, we've assumed the burden of proof. Now, this means that we have to prove to you that Miss Taylor owed a duty of care to Rory, that on September 7, 2018, she breached that duty of care, and that these actions were the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. We will meet our burden today. And to do so, we'll present witness testimony, some live on camera and some by deposition by those who couldn't be here today. You're going to hear from Aubrey Saracen. Now, Aubrey is Rory's friend and her teammate. And you'll hear that Aubrey was on the field on September 7, 2018, the day that Rory passed away. You're going to hear that she saw everything leading up to Rory's death. She'll tell you about how hot it was that day, about how the team members weren't given any breaks or water or shade to cool off in. She'll tell you about how she's never seen a punishment so cruel and violent and extreme in all of her time playing soccer. And she'll tell you about how Rory, she didn't look good. She was visibly pale and shaking and struggling with the punishment. And yet, Miss Taylor never said stop. You'll also hear about how Miss Taylor specifically created these unbearable and dangerous practice conditions in an attempt to train her players. She specifically chose to practice at the hottest time of the day to toughen up the team. You'll hear that she specifically chose Burma Road as a punishment because she wanted to teach Rory a lesson. You'll hear that she specifically chose slide tackling as the drill because it's a hard tackle, because it involves a lot of physical contact. All of this despite being warned of the dangers of such practices and having industry standards prohibiting such behavior. Miss Taylor didn't care. September 7th, 2018 was a tragedy. A beautiful young woman with a bright future lost her life. Throughout today's trial, I ask that you think about how this could have been avoided and how if Miss Taylor had just acted differently, acted reasonably, Rory might still be alive. At the end of today's trial, I'll stand where I'm standing now. I'll review all of the evidence that you will hear today, and I'll ask you to find the only just verdict in today's case. I'll ask you to find Coach Taylor liable. Thank you.
Does defense wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, just a moment to set up. May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
What happened to Rory Street is a tragedy, and no one today is going to dispute that. And our hearts go out to the Street family. But we're here today to decide who was at fault for this death. And the evidence will show that my client, Coach Reese Taylor, was not responsible for the death of Rory Street. Instead, Rory Street made a series of choices that led to her death. Now, this is something opposing counsel failed to mention in her opening statement, but Rory Street made a choice on September 7th to take cocaine before she went to soccer practice. And then she made the choice to tell no one about this. Not her teammates, not her trainer, and certainly not my client, Coach Taylor. It was Miss Street's action and then inaction that ultimately led to her death. Now, while my client had a duty to protect the health and safety of her players on the soccer field, Coach Taylor is not a mind reader, and she cannot be expected to assume that her players are going to come to practice having taken drugs. Now, while we understand the plaintiff's desire to hold someone accountable for the death and loss of her daughter, the truth is, Your Honor, cocaine kills. And cocaine killed Miss Street on September 7th, 2018. Now you're going to meet Coach Taylor today. This is a woman who has dedicated her life to coaching and mentoring young soccer players just like Miss Street. Now she's a successful coach, her team wins, and yes, that is important to her. But she'll also tell you that success only comes with hard work. And so she pushes her players to reach their highest potential. And she won't shy away from this when you hear from her on Direct today. Now, Your Honor, you don't have to like Ms. Taylor's coaching methods, but we trust that you'll be able to put emotions aside and find that her actions were not a proximate cause of Ms. Street's death. Now, you'll learn today that Ms. Taylor believes in discipline and accountability. But most of all, she values her players' health and safety over everything. More than the game, more than practice, and certainly more than winning. You'll hear that on September 7th, Miss Street was at a soccer practice along with other teammates. Now, that day was a hot day, but so were most days in September here in Texas. This day, however, something was off. Not knowing about Miss Street's drug use, all that Coach Taylor saw was that one of her star players was not performing where she should be. And so Coach Taylor did what she always does. She held Miss Street accountable by making her practice drills during the soccer practice. First, my client had Rory run Burma Road, which, as you'll learn, is a decades-old Waco High School tradition meant to discipline and motivate its soccer players. Now, when that failed to motivate Miss Street, Coach Taylor tried a new drill involving a slide tackle. Now, this is a common occurrence in soccer, a slide tackle, and that involves tackling the player who's dribbling the ball. Now, this drill wasn't easy, but that's the point of these soccer drills. They're designed to make players better during practice. But what Coach Taylor did not know during this soccer practice, the key information you'll learn would have changed every decision that my client made that day, was that Miss Street had taken cocaine before she came to practice. Now, the evidence will show that Rory Street died of a heart attack caused by that cocaine, which was found in her system when she died. Now, you're going to hear from our expert today, a man named Spencer London, and he's an expert in toxicology, and he will confirm that Miss Street's decision to use cocaine is what killed her on September 7th. He'll tell you that that cocaine damaged her heart and made her more susceptible to heat exhaustion and heat stroke, resulting in her collapsing on the soccer field during practice that day. She'll also explain to you that cocaine causes heart swelling, which makes it harder for the heart to pump blood around the body and beat regularly. And Miss Street's autopsy, which you will see today, will confirm this. Now, Ms. London will also tell you that cocaine use inhibits the body's ability to naturally cool itself down, which makes someone using cocaine, like Ms. Street was, prone to heat exhaustion. Your Honor, you will learn that my client wasn't aware of Rory's cocaine use, and if she had been, we wouldn't be here today. Because if Rory had said a single word about ingesting cocaine before practice, my client, Coach Taylor, would never have allowed her on the field and at practice that day. You'll learn that Miss Street wasn't feeling well during practice and kept this information to herself throughout that practice. She chose to power through soccer practice that day instead of telling the coach what was wrong with her. She chose to not ask for a break, not get some water, and she chose to just continue with those drills. You'll learn that Miss Street didn't tell a single adult about the chest pain she was experiencing on the soccer field that day. Now, these are things that my client and the trainers on the field that day could not have guessed. They would not be able to tell this without Miss Street telling them. Miss Street could have said something, but she did not, and unfortunately, this inaction caused her death. Now, it's tragic, but it is simply the truth here. My client's decisions did not cause Miss Street's death. Her own choices did. Her actions and then her inaction. Now, we don't know why she chose to take cocaine before practice, but she did. And simply put, the cocaine killed her. As such, at the end of this trial, I will ask Your Honor to return the only verdict consistent with justice and with the facts in this case, to find my client, Coach Taylor, not liable for the death of Rory Street.
All right, counsel. Matter of housekeeping before we start with our case in chief. Any issues with the Zoom process, be sure and let the presiding court know. The cell number is 254-715-4875. Again, 254-715-4875. And I would again remind all participants other than those speaking to make sure that you have your mute on, as well as continuing with no visual. Is plaintiff ready to proceed with case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. Before we call our first witness, I would like to read portions of a pre-admitted exhibit onto the record. This will be Exhibit 16, the report of Dr. Reagan Mcconaughey.
Proceed.
Mr. Flynn, could you please publish? Thank you. I'll be starting on page 2, where it says overview of opinions. Dr. Mcconaughey's opinion states, here is the opinion that I have reached in this case based on a reasonable degree of professional and/or medical certainty. Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke. And then on the third page of this document, on the last paragraph, first sentence, it is also my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Rory Street's death was not a result of cocaine use. And then turning to the last page of Dr. Mcconaughey's report, on that very same paragraph, the amount of cocaine found in Rory Street's system was only 60 nanograms per milliliter, which is a finding consistent with the ingestion of only a nominal amount of cocaine, or that there was a great deal of time between ingestion and testing. And at this time, Your Honor, we're ready to call our first witness to the stand.
Call your witness.
At this time, we call Jordan Street by deposition. May I proceed?
You may.
Starting on page 2, line 6. Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jordan Street.
How old are you?
I'm 55 years old.
Line 15. Do you have any children?
I did. My daughter, Rory.
Line 23. What happened to Rory?
She died at soccer practice on September 7th, 2018.
Turning to page 3, line 15. Did Rory participate in any sports?
Yes, she played varsity soccer for the school. She also played soccer for a private traveling club team on the weekends. To be honest, that kid's life was pretty much soccer 24/7. Getting her to read a book was the hard part.
Turning to page 4, line 14. Was soccer something the two of you shared?
You know, I played soccer in college, so I already loved the game. But I didn't care what the sport was. I just loved having a kid that was into sports of any kind. I loved getting up on the weekends when she was little to go kick the ball in the backyard and let her try to dribble it past me. I loved talking about games and strategy. It brought back so many memories of my playing days, but this was even better because it was my kid and it made her so happy. By the time Rory was in high school, we even had a favorite team, West Ham United, we would root together on every weekend during the English Premier League season. We loved going to T-Bone's barbecue to watch matches. I thought we would be forever blowing bubbles.
What position did you play?
I was a starting striker. Loved it.
Do you still play, like in local non-competitive matches?
Objection, Your Honor. May I be heard?
You may.
We object to the what we anticipate the next answer will be on both relevance grounds and 403 grounds, as it's substantially more prejudicial than it is probative. As an offer of proof, Your Honor, this witness will go into an injury that she suffered years ago when she played soccer. It has absolutely no connection to today's case, and because it has no connection to today's case, it is substantially more prejudicial than it is probative, and it should not be admitted into evidence, Your Honor.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 401, for something to be relevant, it just has to make a fact of matter in today's case more or less likely. Now, part of our burden today is to show that Coach Taylor was negligent and that injury or death was foreseeable as a result of her actions. Now, if allowed to read the answer, Miss Street will go in to say that an opposing player did slide tackle her from behind and she broke her leg as a result of this slide tackle. As you heard during my opening statement, slide tackling is the drill that Coach Taylor had Rory Street repeat 15 times in a row. This just goes to show how dangerous this was and how negligent Coach Taylor was ordering this to be happening to one person over and over again 15 times in a row. And for something to be more prejudicial than probative, it has to be unfairly prejudicial. Just because this is bad for the defense's case doesn't mean that it's excluded under Rule 403. There's certainly probative value to hear about how dangerous this move is.
Reply.
Your Honor, that this witness suffered an injury similar to this years ago does not make it foreseeable to the defendant in this case. It has no relevance to the conduct that took place in this case as related to Rory Street and the defendant. That is what's at issue today, not whether or not this witness years ago while playing soccer got injured in a similar way. By allowing this into testimony, it will prejudice my client into believing because this witness got injured once before, this makes it more likely that someone else would get injured doing this drill. It has absolutely no relation to what took place in today's case, which is why we're at trial today, Your Honor, and therefore it should not be allowed into evidence.
The injury with the witness is a broken ankle.
Yes, it was a broken leg and ankle in several places, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, Mr. Flynn, moving on to page 8, line 9. Are slide tackles violent?
They can be. I mean, it's soccer, so a lot of the injuries are pretend, acting. But anytime you're running full speed and you slide feet first at another player's legs, that can be a dangerous situation.
And then could you please just read the answer starting on line 20?
Well, at a very basic level, you could collide with the player and trip them or knock them to the ground. And again, you're running fast, so that collision can be violent. Also, you're talking about leg-on-leg contact, so there is always a risk for a knee injury or an ankle injury or even a broken bone. Look, I know what some people think about soccer, but it can be a very violent game at times.
The next question, is it important to teach slide tackling as a coach?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor. We object to what we anticipate will be this witness giving an improper opinion with improper foundation. Your Honor, this witness will go into what happened that day at practice, and this witness was not there at practice, and therefore this should be precluded.
Response.
May I be heard, Your Honor? Yes, Your Honor. Opposing counsel had the time to object to the form of a question or object to speculation at the time that this deposition was given. Unfortunately, because Ms. Street can't be with us here today, we're bound by the answer given in the deposition, so I abide by your ruling. We're happy to take out certain portions of the answer if Your Honor would like.
Was it a requirement that objections as to form be made at the deposition?
Your Honor,
there was. Sorry, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Ms. Fitzpatrick.
I would just say, Your Honor, my objection is more to just form. It's also to the content of the answer. But again, what is allowed in a deposition is not what is allowed to be admitted during trial. There are two different evidentiary standards there, and therefore that should not be an argument to allow this in today.
Well, it also gives the opportunity for an attorney to rephrase the question such that it is not objectionable by raising the objection timely at deposition. Overruled. Proceed.
Is it important to teach slide tackling as a coach?
Yes, it is, but that isn't what happened here. This wasn't a drill to teach Rory how to slide tackle or defend against them. Rory knew how to slide tackle and how to avoid them. This was about punishment. Coach Taylor lost her temper and went too far. That drill wasn't necessary. In all the time that I've played, coached, and watched soccer, I've never seen a drill like that. Not once.
Your Honor, at this time,
Thank
having
you.
heard the answer of the witness, we move again to object to that answer and strike it as it was an improper lay opinion with a lack of foundation. Again, this wasn't to the form of the question, but the content of the answer here.
Response?
Same response as before, Your Honor. Unfortunately, we're bound by what is stated in the deposition because an objection wasn't stated earlier. We're not able to rephrase the answer in any way. Furthermore, we don't believe that anything that this witness said was unfairly speculative. A lay witness is allowed to make opinions that are rationally based on their perceptions. Ms. Street did testify that she knew what happened to her daughter. It's reasonable for us to assume that she knew the circumstances at practice when she died. And then for Ms. Street, we've heard that she's played soccer herself, and to say that she's never seen a drill like this or heard of it, that's completely within her her purview to make an opinion about that.
Reply?
Your Honor, first of all, it is speculation as to what this witness thinks happened at practice. She was not there at that practice, and therefore her opinion of what occurred should not be allowed into evidence. She doesn't know the motivations behind the coach's actions or what prompted those actions. Further, for her to opine on the drill wasn't necessary is an improper lay opinion. Number one, because she wasn't there, but number two, because she doesn't have the requisite knowledge to determine that.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Very briefly.
I believe what Ms. Fitzpatrick just said goes to the weight, not the admissibility. She does have the opportunity to cross-examine this witness and potentially bring up other lines in the deposition that show that Ms. Street was not there at practice, and I believe that's the more appropriate avenue to do so.
Overruled. Continue.
That was all I was planning on reading at this point, Your Honor. Thank you.
Your Honor, the defense has counter designations for this witness. Would you prefer we do that on our case in chief or read it at this time?
At this time, please.
Yes, Your Honor. May I have my co-counsel assist me?
Yes.
Directing court and counsel to page 2 of the testimony. Question, line 1. Were you there at practice that day?
No, I was at work.
So do you have any information or knowledge about what happened that day?
No, other than what I've heard from others about what happened, but I didn't see it.
Moving to page 5, line 12. Did you push Rory to be an athlete?
I don't know if I would use the word push. I encourage Rory to work hard at sports and at everything else in her life. I taught Rory to never show weakness and to never complain. I wanted her to be tough, to play through the pain, because that's what makes a champion. Rory was tough because I made her tough.
Moving to page 6, line 4, question. Did you have to stay on top of Rory to make sure she was practicing and keeping up with exercising?
Not any more than any other parent of a teenager. Rory sometimes wanted to goof off instead of following Coach Taylor's non-practice exercise routines, and I would have to remind her of what soccer means for college and maybe a pro career.
Line 12, question. Did she use drugs?
Absolutely not. If I had suspected that or seen any evidence of that, then there would have been serious consequences.
Moving to page 7, line 3, question. Do you believe that discipline is important for a kid?
Yes, 100% yes. You know, my granddaddy always said, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I believe in that. You can't let them get away with being lazy and entitled. You have to keep them in line.
With that, Your Honor, the defense is done with the counter designations.
All right. Plaintiff have anything further from this deposition?
Not from this deposition, Your Honor. We're ready to call our next witness.
Please do.
The plaintiff calls Aubrey Saracen to the stand.
If she will please make her appearance by doing as she did. Proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Aubrey Saracen.
How old are you, Aubrey?
18.
Do you go to school here in Waco?
Yes, I'm a senior at Waco High.
Are you involved in any clubs or sports at school?
I'm on the soccer team.
And are you on varsity, junior varsity?
I was on varsity for about 3 years, and now I kind of split the position a little bit with someone else, but I'm a central midfielder.
And were you on the varsity team in 2018?
Yes.
And do you know Rory Street?
Yes.
Who was Rory Street?
My best friend, we grew up together and we were on the soccer team together. She was a striker on the team.
And was she any good at soccer?
Definitely. She was the superstar of the team. She had more talent than all of us and the passion, and was constantly being looked at by D1 recruiters.
What happened to Rory?
On September 7th, 2018, she was killed at soccer practice.
Do you remember the date?
September 7th, 2018.
Thank you. Your audio cut out a little bit.
Sorry.
Were you at practice that day?
Yes.
And I know this might be hard, but I have to ask you some questions about practice. Do you remember what time it started?
Around 3:15, right after school is when we usually started.
Your Honor, permission to publish what's already been entered as Exhibit 21.
You may.
Now, Aubrey, I'm showing you the weather report for the day that we're talking about. Mr. Flynn, could you please go to the time that Ms. Saracen just was speaking about? You just told us that practice started at 3:15. Around what temperature was it at that time?
Over 100 degrees, closer to 103 degrees, actually.
And did the temperature ever go down before your practice ended?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. You can take that down. Now, when you play your season games, do those normally happen in the afternoon at the time that your practices are?
At the beginning of the season, because it starts in August and it's still so hot, our games are usually played in the evenings. And then as the season goes on, we play more in the afternoon.
And on September 7th, 2017, how did practice begin for you?
I can't remember exactly what I did, but I was on the Burma Road pretty much as soon as practice started.
Aubrey, what is Burma Road?
It's a punishment tactic, basically, that we players get sent to by coach if something's going wrong. And so basically what it entails is for 30 yards, we run as fast as we can. For the next 30 yards, we dribble the ball, and then we have to score into an open net, and then we bear crawl the 60 yards back. And this goes, we just keep going in this loop until coach tells us we can stop.
You said that you run on this loop until coach tells you you can stop. Who's your coach?
Coach Taylor.
So how long would you typically be doing this punishment before Coach Taylor told you that you could stop?
Just as long as she said, basically until you couldn't go any longer.
And on September 7th, 2018, were you the only one running Burma Road?
At first, but after a little while, coach sent Rory to come join me on Burma Road.
Did she say anything to Rory when she sent her over there?
Yes, coach said something to the effect of, get your sorry butt off the field. You're useless, so you might as well just run until you pass out.
When Rory came to join you on the field over running Burma Road, what did she look like?
Not well. She looked paler than normal. She was breathing heavily, just not her normal self.
And besides Coach Taylor, were there any other adults at practice?
We have a trainer there, but they weren't really around at Burma Road or anything.
Aubrey, would you recognize a picture of the Waco High practice field if I showed it to you?
Yes.
And with Your Honor's permission, could you please locate Exhibit 2 in your digital exhibit binder?
Are you asking the court?
Yes, Your Honor.
I have the exhibits physical.
Yes, Your Honor. I was just asking if the witness would be allowed to look at the exhibit so I could lay some foundation for what it is.
Yes.
Right. Aubrey, could you just tell me when you have Exhibit 2 pulled up?
Yes. Okay, I have it pulled up.
All right. What is that?
It's an aerial picture of the Waco High soccer fields.
And is there anything in addition to just the soccer field that's on this photo?
Yes, it's the blue rectangle represents the soccer field and the red square represents Burma Road.
And do those squares accurately represent where you would run Burma Road and where your practice field were?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would move to enter Exhibit 2 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
Permission to publish this via screen share?
Correct.
All right, Aubrey, can you explain using this photo where you and Rory were running Burma Road?
We were in the box, the red box, basically.
And where were Coach Taylor and Trainer Merriweather during this?
They were about 20 yards away, I think, on the actual practice soccer field.
On this aerial view of the field, do you see any place where players can get some shade?
No,
Are there any trees on that field?
no,
Are there any tents?
no.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. You can take down Exhibit 2. How long were you and Rory running Burma Road together?
I can't remember exactly, maybe 15 minutes.
And during those 15 minutes, did Coach Taylor ever give you a break?
No,
Did Coach Taylor ever say that you could go grab some water?
no,
And after you had been running Burma Road, did she ever tell Rory that she could stop?
no.
What did Rory do after she ran Burma Road?
Well, Coach Taylor called Rory back to the practice field for this new punishment drill thing she came up with that day.
What was that punishment?
It was a slide tackling exercise where the team lined up facing Rory and would basically go one at a time, performing a slide tackle on Rory, which is basically where they would slide and knock her legs to get the ball out of her possession.
And when those players would knock at her legs, would Rory fall over?
Yes.
And have you ever practiced slide tackles before?
Yes, but not like this.
And what made this punishment different than the slide tackles that you had done before?
Slide tackles in a game and in a normal practice setting are never done in this consecutive way where it's 15 people, one at a time, going in a row, just constantly hitting you. Normally there's some kind of reprieve.
How did Rory look before Coach Taylor ordered these slide tackling drills?
She was breathing heavily. She had her hands on her hips and was kind of bent over. Again, she was really pale and didn't look healthy. She didn't look like herself at all.
Now, before Rory got into these slide tackling drills, did Coach Taylor give her a break?
No,
Did she let her get some water?
definitely not.
Now, you said that Rory got tackled to the ground. How did Rory get back up to do the next tackle?
At one point, Coach Taylor walked over and actually yanked Rory up by her jersey collar and got her up and then blew the whistle so that the next girl would do the slide tackle.
Did Coach Taylor stop after Rory had been knocked over 5 times?
No,
Did she stop after 10 times?
no,
How many times did Coach Taylor let Rory get knocked down?
about 15 times.
And after Rory had been slide tackled to the ground for the 15th time in a row, what happened?
It was chaos. Basically, Rory collapsed, started convulsing on the ground, wasn't breathing. Everyone ran over, the trainer ran over, and we called the ambulance, but it was too late.
At any point before Rory was tackled to the ground, did Coach Taylor ever say that she could stop?
Definitely not.
Thank you, Aubrey. I have no further questions. I pass the witness.
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Saracen.
Afternoon.
Now, I want to talk to you about the soccer practice on September 7th. Now, you'll agree that soccer in and of itself is a physical sport, right?
Yes.
It requires players like you to be in good health.
Correct.
Now, you've run Burma Road before, right?
Yes.
In fact, there's a designated spot on the field, as you said on direct, for Burma Road drills.
Yes.
Now, this drill helps players like you build stamina, right?
I guess that's a byproduct, but the main role of it is punishment.
So you're saying the main role of the Burma Road drill is punishment?
Yes.
Now, to be clear, when you were running the Burma Road drill on September 7th, you weren't experiencing any chest pains, right?
No.
You didn't collapse, right?
Correct.
You didn't have a seizure that day.
Correct.
To be clear, you didn't take cocaine before practice that day, did you?
No.
Let's talk about how close you are with Rory Street. You've never seen Miss Street do cocaine, right?
No, because she never did.
I'm going to direct you back to my question. You yourself have never seen her do cocaine, right? You've never heard about her doing drugs?
Correct.
And to be clear, Miss Street was your best friend.
Yes.
You've grown up together.
Yes.
You cared about her.
Yes.
You're close to her family.
Yes.
Just to be clear, you weren't with Miss Street all the time, right?
No.
You weren't with her at every minute before practice.
No.
You couldn't tell me what she was doing before practice on September 7th, right?
I mean, we were just all at school that day, and then we went straight to practice.
Is it your testimony that you were with Miss Street the whole day before practice on September 7th?
No.
So you don't know what she was doing that day before practice, right? Now, you did know that Miss Street was stressed out with school, right?
Yes.
She told you that she was feeling pressure from home.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Response.
Your Honor, this falls under an exception to hearsay 8033. It was a statement of the declarant's state of mind at the time that Miss Street made the statement.
Reply.
Yes, Your Honor. So long as this is confined to Rory Street's statement that she was feeling stressed, I'm okay with that portion coming in. However, I do believe that opposing counsel may go further, and at that time, I just reserve my right to re-object.
Continue.
To be clear, Ms. Saracen, you were told by Miss Street that she was feeling pressure from home, right?
She mentioned it.
Now, I want to talk to you about Miss Street on the soccer field. She was a good soccer player, right?
Yes.
She was the best on your team.
Yes.
Now, you'd never seen Miss Street complain before during practice. I'm sorry, you cut out there. Was that enough? You hadn't seen her complain before during Burma Road?
No.
During any other drill?
Correct.
Now, you often practice soccer in high temperatures, right?
Yes.
You practiced before in August,
Yes.
in September.
Yes.
You've never seen Miss Street collapse during those practices, right?
No, I have not.
Never seen her have a seizure on the ground.
No, I haven't.
Now, you talked on direct extensively about the symptoms that you claim you saw from Miss Street on September 7th. Do you remember that?
Yes.
You claim you saw visible symptoms that day, right?
Yes.
Now, the day after Miss Street died, you sent a text to your friend about this death, right?
Yes.
And in that text, you said that Miss Street collapsed out of nowhere, right?
I think it was something to that effect.
And in that text, you didn't mention these visible signs that you would claim to have seen, right?
No, I mean, my friend had just died. I wasn't going through a run through of the day. I was just saying how shocked I was that my best friend was dead.
And how shocked you were that your friend, Miss Street, had collapsed out of nowhere, right?
Yes.
And nowhere in those texts to your friend did you mention Coach Taylor.
No, I wasn't really thinking about Coach Taylor at that point.
You weren't thinking about Coach Taylor in relation to Miss Street's death at all, right?
No, I was just thinking about how my friend was dead.
Now, earlier you told us that you now split your full-time position with someone else on your team, right?
Yes.
That someone else is the coach's daughter, Coach Taylor's daughter, right?
Correct.
You're no longer a full-time player on the soccer team because Coach Taylor gave her daughter your position.
We split it, but yes.
Well, this upset you, right, this split?
Yeah, it bothered me.
Now I want to talk to you about what happened when you were running Burma Road.
Okay.
When you were running Burma Road, you claimed when Rory came over, she looked pale, right?
She did look pale, yes.
Now you didn't tell the coach this.
No, we don't really talk to coach when we're on Burma Road. We just do what we're told.
To be clear, on September 7th, you didn't talk to coach about Miss Street looking pale, right?
No,
You didn't talk to any trainers about this.
no.
You didn't tell anyone about this.
No, I too was on the Burma Road running it, so there was no one to really tell.
Well, you have other teammates on the field, right, Miss Saracen?
They were on the practice field and we were on Burma Road.
At no point did you go over to the practice field, which is right next to Burma Road, and say to a teammate that Miss Street looked pale.
No, I didn't want to make coach angrier and stay on the Burma Road longer.
I'm gonna direct you back to my question. You didn't go over to a teammate that day and say, hey, I'm concerned about Miss Street, right?
Correct. I didn't want to leave Burma Road.
So that's a no to my question. You didn't tell anyone?
Correct.
Despite feeling concerned about your friend, you told no one about the visible symptoms you claim to have seen, right?
That is correct.
Now, just to be clear, you didn't leave to go and get Miss Street any water at any point, did you?
I was never going to leave Burma Road because I did not want to make my coach angrier. So I stayed and didn't tell anyone and didn't get water, which I regret in hindsight.
Okay. Now, you'll agree with me that water is always available to all the players on the field, right?
If coach lets us go off to the side for a water break, yes.
But it's there.
Yes.
At no point did you see your friend Miss Street walk over to get water.
No, because you couldn't just leave the Burma Road.
Is it your testimony that you could not leave Burma Road, physically could not leave it?
Not physically, we could not leave, but it was our impression as the player that we were supposed to stay there until we were told to leave.
I'm going to direct you back to what happened on September 7th, Miss Saracen. On September 7th, you did not see Rory leave the field to go and get water at any point, right?
That's correct.
And you never heard Rory ask for a break that day?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Fitzpatrick just asked you some questions about whether you told anyone about the signs that you were seeing from your friend Rory. Miss Saracen, are you a trainer?
No.
Are you a coach?
No.
Do you have any experience in physical training?
No.
And when you're running Burma Road, are you allowed to just leave whenever you want?
No.
And what happens if you try to leave Burma Road?
You just get punished further and further.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. As this witness has just stated, she didn't try to leave Burma Road that day. So what would happen if she left would be pure speculation, Your Honor.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
My question wasn't what would have happened if you left. My question was what has happened in the past. Ms. Fitzpatrick asked many questions about whether or why Aubrey Saracen did not leave Burma Road to go get her friend some water or to tell someone that she was concerned for her friend. I'm simply developing the testimony as to why she wouldn't do that.
Any reply?
Your Honor, the question was not what happened in the past. And second, I did not ask this witness why she didn't leave, just merely that she did not leave. Getting into a speculation as to what would have happened had she left, it should not be allowed, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. In the past, if you leave Burma Road, what happens?
You just stay on Burma Road longer. You just get punished more and more.
And in the past, what has happened to players who complained about Burma Road?
Just stay longer on Burma Road if you have a problem with it.
Oh, Ms. Fitzpatrick asked you some questions about you sharing playing time with Coach Taylor's daughter. Does that color your testimony in any way today?
Definitely not. I mean, this whole situation has put into perspective, soccer is just a game. I mean, it does not change what's happening here.
Did you tell the truth when you were testifying earlier?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, witness may excuse herself. Anything further from the plaintiff?
Nothing further from the plaintiff, Your Honor. At this time, we rest our case in chief.
Is defense ready to proceed with its case in chief?
Your Honor, prior to proceeding, we would just make a motion as a matter, a judgment as a matter of law under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 50A. Would Your Honor like to hear the motion?
I would.
Your Honor, the plaintiff has presented no substantial evidence on which a reasonable trier of fact would have a legally sufficient basis to find in the plaintiff's favor. Even when considering the evidence in the light most favorable to the plaintiff here, no reasonable trier of fact could conclude the defendant's actions on September 7th were the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. Instead, what we have shown today is Rory Street ingested cocaine, and that is what caused her death.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. When evaluating a Rule 50 motion for a judgment as a matter of law, you do have to view all of the evidence that we've heard thus far in the light most favorable to the non-moving party. And today, that's us, the plaintiff. We have produced sufficient evidence that a reasonable fact finder could find in our favor. We had to show that Coach Taylor had a duty to Rory, which no one here contests. We had to show that Coach Taylor breached that duty, which we've showed by the fact that Coach Taylor had Rory, despite the fact that she looked sickly, run Burma Road on repeat in the heat, and also do a new drill that has never been tested before that was physically violent, where Rory got tackled to the ground 15 times in a row. And it was under that tackle, the 15th tackle that she suffered, that she started convulsing on the ground and died during Coach Taylor's practice, the practice where she got no breaks, no shade, and no water. We've certainly put forth enough evidence to show that Coach Taylor's actions were the reason that Rory Street died on that day.
Overruled. Do we need to take a break, or are we ready to proceed with the defense case in chief?
May we have a short break, Your Honor?
We'll take 5 minutes. No one leave the Zoom room, and we shall be back in the 5 minutes. Thank you. Defense, you may proceed with your case in chief.
Yes, Your Honor. Prior to calling our first witness, we seek to admit both Exhibit 14 and 15 for the court's reference. This is the autopsy report from Rory Street and the toxicology report.
Your Honor, at this time, I would object to hearsay on both of those documents. They're out-of-court statements being brought into court to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
Your Honor,
Response.
both of these documents, the autopsy and the medical examiner's toxicology report, fall under an exception to hearsay, that is 803.8, as they are both public records.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Nay.
We haven't heard any foundation yet that Exhibits 14 and 15 are public records, and until that foundation has been laid, I believe it's premature to admit these into evidence.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Well, counsel, aren't they, the documents are authenticated? The only objection would be one of hearsay, correct?
Yes, Your Honor, which is what my objection is.
And you're saying these aren't public records and or medical records falling within an exception under the series of the federal rules of evidence.
Your Honor, these may be public records, but we haven't heard sufficient foundation to classify them as such at this point in time.
What brief response do you have to that, defense counsel?
Your Honor, the foundation is shown on the face of the documents themselves. They lay out the office's activities and everything that's necessary for a public record to be admitted into evidence, Your Honor. And as Your Honor said, they are both deemed authentic copies of what they are.
Overruled. They are admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, this time we seek to read in portions of Jessie Merriweather's deposition as she is not present at trial today.
You may proceed.
Directing court and counsel to page 2, line 6. Question, would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
Moving to line 19. Question, what is your job at Waco High?
I'm an athletic trainer and I also teach health.
What is the job of an athletic trainer at a high school?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some level of physical activity and competition. Everything from football to soccer to volleyball to cheerleading and drill team. As a trainer, I work with the students that participate in those activities to keep them healthy and in shape and to treat any injuries that they have.
Do you attend practices?
Yes. Depending on what time of year it is, it may be football or soccer or something else, but there's always a trainer at any official practice for our various athletic teams.
Moving to page 4, line 4. Question, have you worked with Coach Taylor?
I have.
In what capacity?
As a trainer. So I've attended soccer practices and soccer games where Coach Taylor was the coach. I've worked with Coach Taylor in order to treat injured players, and I've worked with Coach Taylor just overseeing the students during practices and games.
Moving to page 8, line 18. Question, at any time did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in a way that would have indicated that she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. And here's the thing, I'm there to take care of those players and they know it. I'm kind of a combination trainer and guardian to the team. So they trust me and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word, and she would have. Rory was a tough kid, but she knew her limits and would let me or coach know when she needed water.
Are players allowed to get water when they want it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Moving to line 21, page 9. Question, based on your knowledge and experience in the field of physical education and sports training, do you think that Coach Taylor's means of disciplining Rory Street on the day in question were reasonable or appropriate?
I don't think they were unusual at all. Coach Taylor is a winning coach that pushes players, but Coach Taylor is also concerned about player safety. We talk about it all the time. So I would term Coach Taylor's conduct and approach to discipline as orthodox in every sense of the word.
With that, Your Honor, defense is done reading in the portions of Jessie Merriweather's testimony.
Plaintiff have any offer?
Yes, Your Honor. All right, Mr. Flynn, I'll be starting on page 3, line 19. You told us earlier that you are 28 years old. Is that a pretty common age for an athletic trainer in your position?
Well, I am the youngest trainer in the Waco Independent School District. In fact, I'm the youngest one ever in the history of the position. So I guess that gives you your answer.
Moving to page 8, line 10. Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching her closely.
Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening, and I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
What were you doing while all of this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
Moving to page 10, line 6. Do you still work at Waco High?
Yeah, I got promoted to head trainer about 2 months ago, so it's going great.
Do you still work with Coach Taylor?
Of course I do. I work with all the coaches, Coach Taylor included. In fact, Coach Taylor is the one who wrote me the recommendation letter for my promotion to head trainer. Again, Coach Taylor has a lot of faith in me and my abilities, and I just want to impress her.
Thank you. That's all I was planning on reading at this time.
All right.
Your
Call.
Honor, the defense calls Coach Reese Taylor at this time.
All right. Coach will present. Proceed, counsel.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, my name is Reese Taylor. You can also call me Coach Taylor.
Coach Taylor, where are you from?
Right here in Waco. I've lived here my entire life.
Did you also go to school here?
Yes, I did. I went to Waco High, and then I drove down the road to go to A&M for college.
And what do you do for work?
Right now, I work at Waco High. I'm a teacher, but I've also been a coach there, a soccer coach there for 6 years.
And how long have you been a soccer coach aside from at Waco High?
Well, in total, it's been 26 years.
And what sports do you coach aside from soccer?
I've coached pretty much everything, volleyball, soccer, tennis, basketball.
And at Waco High, what league do you coach soccer?
Varsity soccer at Waco High.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit more about your coaching experience. You said you've been doing this for 6 years at Waco, is that right?
Yes, for 6 years now.
During your 6 years as a coach at Waco High, has the team been successful?
It's been successful. At least I would say so. We've won 5 districts. We've gone to regional finals twice. And we've made it to the state semifinals once, but we're still looking for that state championship.
Good luck with that. Can you tell the court a little bit about your coaching methods?
Yes, I am a demanding coach. I am strict. I care about my players a lot, but I also know that the sport of soccer is a very difficult sport. It's very physically demanding. So I expect a lot of my players, and I coach them with discipline.
Now, you said you care about your players. Does that include their safety?
Yes, absolutely. Safety always comes first.
Now, you mentioned discipline. Why is that important during soccer practice?
Well, if a soccer player isn't disciplined, they could get hurt during a game. So I make sure that they have discipline starting from the first day of practice all the way through, because I want them to be a strong athlete. And if you aren't disciplined, then you're not going to be a good athlete. And if sometimes an athlete doesn't adhere to the discipline, then we go through even more drills to make sure that it really sticks.
Now, you mentioned drills just now. Is that how you discipline your athletes on the field?
Yes.
Now, is safety a concern while you're running these drills during practice?
Absolutely, 100% of the time.
Now, I want to talk to you some more about the different drills that you do. Is Burma Road one of them?
It is.
Can you describe to the court what that is?
Yes. Burma Road is when a player starts at 1 yard line, and then they run for 30 yards, and then they dribble for 30 yards, and then they shoot a goal. And then if they make it, they will bear crawl back to the start, and they will repeat that.
Now, Coach Taylor, did you come up with the drill Burma Road?
No, I wish I was that creative.
Do you know, have you ever done it before as a player?
Yes, I did it back whenever I was playing soccer a long time ago.
Now, I want to talk to you about Rory Street. Did you coach her?
Yes, I did.
And what type of athlete was she?
She was our star athlete. She was great on the field. It was truly a pleasure to watch.
What was your relationship like with Miss Street?
We had a really good, healthy coach-athlete relationship.
Did you ever have any difficulty with her on the field?
Not really. Sometimes she didn't answer to my critiques, but overall, she was a really good player.
Why does it matter if a player doesn't listen to your critiques or doesn't answer your critiques?
Because ultimately it could lead to a lack of safety during the game. If one of the players isn't playing as she should, then another player could get hurt. So I also have to maintain a level of control over practice, and sometimes that means a little bit more disciplinary drills than other times.
Now, Coach Taylor, I want to draw your attention to September 7th of 2018. Do you remember that day?
Absolutely.
And why do you remember that day?
Well, it was the day that our star player died in front of me.
Now, we'll get to that in just a moment, but I just want to break down what happened before that occurred on September 7th. Can you walk us through how your interaction began with Miss Street that day?
Yes, we started practice like we usually do. It was right after school let out, and we started with a scrimmage. And during that scrimmage, I saw that Rory wasn't really playing very well.
And what did you do in reaction to Miss Street not playing very well?
I told her to go run Burma Road, which is pretty common.
And what happened after you had Rory run Burma Road?
Well, while she was running Burma Road, she wasn't acting like normal. She wasn't responding to any of the critiques. She wasn't, I told her to play better and she wouldn't. So then I set up the slide tackle drill.
When you say it wasn't acting like normal, what were you referring to?
Just that, like, she was goofing off. She was just like talking to other people and not really, she wasn't playing, she was just goofing off.
Now, I want to talk to you about the second drill you just mentioned. What is a slide tackle drill?
So a slide tackle drill is of course, it is a drill that we do at practice, but it's something that happens really frequently in a game. So during a soccer game, if one player has the ball, an opposing player may come and try and take the ball from underneath this player. So they'll perform a slide tackle to come and get it, come and get the ball. But it can be really dangerous if you don't really know how to perform that well or know how to block that type of tackle. So we frequently do it as a drill exercise in practice to have these players block that during a game.
And what happened that day once you began the slide tackle drill with Rory?
She kept falling over. It's a tackle drill, so she would fall to the ground. That's pretty common. Then after the 14th or the 15th tackle, she fell and she started convulsing, which was very surprising. Someone called 911 and I called over Jess Merriweather, but Rory was gone before the ambulance got there.
Now, Coach Taylor, I want to talk to you a little bit more about Rory's demeanor before she collapsed. When you asked her to run Burma Road, did it ever occur to you that something was wrong with her physically?
No, she seemed like distracted and goofing off and unfocused, but not physically unwell.
And did that change when you told her to run the second drill?
No.
Now, are these drills physically demanding?
Yes, they're very physically demanding, but so is the sport of soccer. It's during a game, they're running for 90 minutes at a time. So I need to make sure that they're conditioned for those same circumstances. So it's hard running these drills, but it's also hard for many reasons.
Did you believe on September 7th that having Rory run these drills would cause her physical harm at all?
No, Rory was already in great shape, so I didn't think that she would have any issue with running these drills.
Before running the Burma Road drill, did Rory ever tell you that she was feeling unwell?
No.
What about after running that drill?
No, not that I had heard of.
Before the slide tackle drill?
No.
If Rory had told you she was feeling unwell, would you have forced her to keep on doing those drills?
No, I would have pulled her out immediately.
At any point, did you see her looking pale?
No, she didn't look pale.
At any point, did Rory ask you for a break during those drills?
No, she did not.
Did she tell you she was experiencing chest pains?
No.
Did she express any concern about doing the drills?
No.
Did she ask you for a water break?
No.
Now, finally, Ms. Taylor, I want to talk to you about how you run practices generally. Do you provide water to your players at practice?
Absolutely. The girls bring water bottles typically to practice, but in addition, we have water on the field so that you can drink water whenever you need to.
And is there a trainer present at practice?
Yes. Trainer Meriwether is always there at practice, and she makes sure that the players are properly hydrated too.
Now, and if an athlete tells you during practice that she isn't feeling well, do you continue practicing?
No, never. If the athlete tells me that they're not feeling well, then we immediately ask them to take a break, and I don't push them further. That doesn't make any sense.
Now, on September 7th, Coach Taylor, were you aware that during practice, Rory had cocaine in her system?
No.
Would you have let Rory continue doing those drills if you knew that she had cocaine in her system?
No, that would be very, very dangerous.
Would you have let her practice that day at all?
No.
Your Honor, no further questions. Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Taylor.
Good afternoon.
My name's Olivia Dworkin, and I'm going to be asking you some questions on behalf of Ms. Street. If at any time my audio cuts out or you don't understand a question, just let me know, okay?
Hello.
Well, Ms. Taylor, you describe yourself as pretty competitive, right?
Yes.
You were even an athlete yourself.
Yes, I was.
And during your days as an athlete, you always knew that you wanted to be a coach.
Yes, I did.
You actually went on and got a degree in physical education.
Yes, I did.
And you started coaching right after you graduated.
Yes.
You've been a coach for 26 years.
Yes, for most of my life.
And now you're a high school soccer coach.
Yes, a varsity soccer coach.
And a varsity soccer coach, the kids that you teach are normally 14 to 18 years old.
Yes.
Now, as a coach, you take your job very seriously, don't you?
Of course I do, yes.
You want to make sure that you're keeping up to date on the latest and the best coaching techniques.
Yes.
And in order to do so, you attend coaching clinics all around the state, right?
Yes, I do.
And these coaching clinics, they happen several times a year.
Yes.
You go to these clinics and you learn about recommendations and suggestions for how to run your practices, right?
Yes, I do. Yes, they do.
And it's safe
coaching clinics, yes.
It's safe to say that you're pretty familiar with these recommendations then?
Yes, I am.
And being a very serious and dedicated coach, I'm assuming you follow all of these practices?
I'm aware of it, but they're not strict guidelines that I need to follow. So I wouldn't say across the board that I follow all of them.
Well, let's talk about some of the ones that you don't follow. You'd agree with me that you attended a conference back in the summer of 2018, right?
Yes.
And that was the annual meeting of the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association.
Yes.
And during that meeting, there was a slideshow presentation.
Yes, there was.
Would you please look at Exhibit 11 in your digital exhibit binder and let me know when you get there?
Yes, I can. 1 second. Okay, I have it pulled up.
And that's the slideshow presentation that was presented at that meeting that you attended?
Yes, it was.
And it hasn't been changed in any way?
I don't believe so.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would move to enter Exhibit 11 into evidence.
Your Honor, the defense objects this exhibit as hearsay and also on 403 grounds, Your Honor.
What are the 403 grounds?
Your Honor, we believe that the plaintiff will seek to elicit these as guidelines that my client was under at the time. However, there is no evidence to suggest these were mandated guidelines to be followed by high school coaches. Because of that, there is an unfair prejudice that will attach to make it seem like that was the burden she was supposed to be held to, that she had a duty to follow these guidelines in this slideshow. That is not the case, Your Honor. Further, these are hearsay because they are an out-of-court statement being offered for the truth. The truth here that plaintiff is trying to show that these were safety guidelines that my client was to follow.
Let's break it down. First of all, on the 403, what's your response, plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. In order for something to be more prejudicial than probative, it has to be substantially more prejudicial than it is probative. We're not attempting to elicit any testimony that these guidelines were mandatory, rather that these were recommendations that Ms. Taylor was aware of, that she was put on notice that these are recommendations that she should follow if, for instance, she's practicing her players in a certain degree of heat. We're not trying to go beyond that by saying that these are mandatory or somehow that Ms. Taylor was breaking the law by not following them. To the extent that we go into that, we just won't go into that, Your Honor. The probative value of these slides is to go to show that Ms. Taylor was aware of these practices, and if allowed to testify to them, will elicit that she did not follow those practices. We're merely trying to contrast her practices with the practices that were recommended at this meeting.
So you're not offering them as the standard of care?
Your Honor, we're offering these as suggestions and recommendations that Coach Taylor was aware of, and just showing that she did not follow those recommendations. We're not trying to show that these are mandatory or that she was told that they were mandatory to follow, which is what Ms. Fitzpatrick was saying in her objection to 403. 403
objections overruled. What about the hearsay?
As to the hearsay argument, Your Honor, we're not bringing in these slides to prove the truth of the matter asserted. As I said earlier, we're mainly trying to contrast the practices that are listed on the slides with the practices that Coach Taylor actually implemented at her own practices. We're not using this to show the truth of any certain statement that's elicited on the slideshow, rather to show that Coach Taylor had knowledge and was put on notice of certain things that she maybe should be doing and that she didn't follow those recommendations.
Defense?
Your Honor, it sounds like the purpose the plaintiff is using these for is to show that there was, in fact, a suggested guideline that this witness should be following. And that is using the document for the truth of the matter. By saying that you did not follow these, you're using that for the truth. And therefore it is still hearsay, to which there is no exception, Your Honor.
Any other
response, Your Honor?
Very briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. I stand by my previous argument. We're not putting this forward for the truth of the matter asserted, rather to show that there are these recommendations out there, that Ms. Taylor was aware of them, that she had knowledge of them, and that she chose not to follow them and instead implemented different practices.
Why do I have to admit them into evidence for you to utilize them in that respect, counsel?
Well, Your Honor, if allowed to be entered into evidence, I would publish it so that everybody could see that there are certain recommendations and see what those recommendations are. And then I'd be able to ask Ms. Taylor if she did those recommendations. And I believe it's going to be very probative for this to be in evidence so that we can consider it and how Ms. Taylor did not follow these recommendations during deliberation.
I think right now it's too broad a request, so I'm going to sustain the objection for now.
Yes, Your Honor, just to clarify your ruling, are you saying that I am allowed to ask about the practices without entering the exhibit into evidence?
I'm going to let you do what you think you need to do to set forth your case, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Taylor, you did attend that meeting in June of 2018, right?
I did.
And at that meeting, they talked about practices to keep your players safe?
Yes, they did.
And they told you some recommendations on how to conduct your practices, is that right?
Correct.
Some of those recommendations governed practices that occurred in over 100-degree weather, is that right?
The recommendations mentioned how to conduct practices in over 100-degree weather, but I don't know about the word govern.
Well, they recommended certain things that you should do if you're going to have a practice in 100-degree weather, right?
Yes.
And on September 7th, 2018, it was over 100 degrees that day, right?
Yes, it was. It's always that hot in Texas.
And despite it being over 100 degrees, you chose not to follow the recommendations that were stated at that meeting that you attended.
I chose not to follow them, correct?
Most notably, you did not give your players a break every 15 minutes.
Objection, Your Honor. At this point, counsel is trying to backdoor in impermissible hearsay, which goes against Your Honor's sustained ruling.
It does not. Overruled. Continue, counsel.
Could you ask the question again?
Notably, yes, you did not give your players a break every 15 minutes.
I did not.
Well, in addition to not giving your players a break every 15 minutes, you actually didn't give Rory a break at all, did you?
I did not that day.
Rory was actually practicing with the rest of the team on the main field during the beginning of practice, right?
Yes, during the scrimmage.
And you sent her to go run Burma Road with her friend Aubrey, right?
Yes.
Before she went over to run Burma Road, you didn't give her a break?
I did not.
You didn't give her a sip of water?
If she had asked for one, I would have, but no, I did not give her a sip of water.
And then when you brought Rory back to the main field to practice your slide tackling drills, did you give her a break in between those two punishments?
I did not.
Did you give her a sip of water?
Once again, if she had asked for it, I would have, but no, I did not give her a sip of water.
And did you give her any time to rest in the shade during these punishments?
I did not.
Is there even any shade on the field?
No, there is not.
So even if a player wanted to rest in the shade, they couldn't.
They could not.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about those slide tackling drills that you were doing.
Okay.
You're familiar with slide tackles, right?
Yes.
You describe them as hard tackles.
Yes.
You say that they involve a lot of physical contact between the players.
Correct.
And those reasons, that's actually why you chose to use slide tackles for Rory on September 7th, right?
Yes. Also for the reason that they're dangerous during a game, but yes.
Well, as a coach, you know that slide tackling can cause serious injury to both of the players involved.
Yes.
Each time a slide tackle occurs, there's a chance that the player being tackled will fall to the ground.
Yes.
Now, you said that these happen in a game, but have you ever seen a scenario where one person in a game got tackled 15 times in a row without a break in between?
I had not.
Now, on September 7th, 2018, you created a drill where that was what you were doing to Rory, right?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor, which coaching clinic did you learn this drill from?
I don't know.
Well, actually, you made up this drill yourself, right?
Yes.
You'd never done it before?
Yes, correct. I've never done it before.
But you wanted to do this particular drill because you wanted to make sure that Rory got the point that her attitude was not appropriate, right?
Yes, also to maintain safety during a game.
And that's why you told everyone to line up 10 yards away from Rory on the field?
Yes.
And whenever you blew that whistle, they were supposed to run at her, right?
Yes.
And after one tackle to the ground, did you then give Rory a break?
No.
Did you say that the team could stop the drill?
No.
After 5 tackles, did you then give Rory a break?
No.
After 10 tackles, did you then give Rory a break?
No.
You actually made Rory keep going after those 10 tackles, didn't you?
Yes.
And at this point, Miss Taylor, you noticed that Rory was visibly struggling. Is that right?
Yes, it's very hard.
But you didn't tell her that she could stop at that point.
No.
You actually ordered 5 more tackles on her.
I did.
And on that 15th tackle, Rory didn't get up.
It was either 14th or 15th, but yes.
She collapsed on the field.
She did.
And she died before medical help could arrive.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Coach Taylor, you were asked a series of questions about breaks during soccer practice. Do you recall that?
Yes.
To your knowledge, is it mandatory for you to take breaks every 15 minutes?
No, it's not mandatory.
And did you give your players breaks?
If they ask for one, yes.
Would you ever deny a player a break if they asked for one?
No.
And was there water available during these breaks?
Yes, there's always water on the field ready for a player to take.
Now I want to talk to you some more about those slide tackle drills. Why did you have Rory and other players do those slide tackle drills?
The other players did the slide tackle drills because if they didn't practice this during the drill, they would perform them incorrectly at a game, and that could lead to a very serious injury like a broken leg or something at a game. So we do them at practice regularly, just not this one time that it was a little bit different.
Now, during the time that you had Rory doing slide tackle drills, did she ever ask for a break?
She did not.
Did she ever ask you to stop the drill?
She did not.
Did she ever tell you she was feeling unwell?
She did not.
At any point that day, did she tell you she was feeling unwell?
No, she did not.
Thank you, Coach Taylor. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. You're excused, Coach.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything else from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense would like to read in certain portions of Exhibit 18, which is already in evidence. It's the expert report of Mr. London.
You may proceed.
Directing court and counsel to page 2 of Exhibit 18, overview of opinion. Here is the opinion that I have reached in this case based on a reasonable degree of professional and/or medical certainty. Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine. Analysis. According to the toxicology report, when Rory Street's blood was drawn and tested at approximately 7:30 on September 8, 2018, it tested positive for 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine. Moving to the end of that page, cocaine use can ultimately lead to cardiac arrhythmia, heart attacks, cerebral hemorrhage, or stroke and heart failure. Additionally, cocaine use can induce hypothermia, which lowers the threshold for heat stroke because it inhibits the body's natural cooling process by causing vasoconstriction in the extremities, which keeps most of the blood supply internal. This impairs the body's natural cooling because natural cooling happens when blood is cooled by going into the skin. Moving to page 3, Rory complained of chest pain, feeling funny, which could be related to any number of symptoms of cocaine use, groaning, which could be related to nausea, and convulsing, twitching on the ground. All these symptoms are consistent with cocaine use. It is true that the amount of cocaine found in Rory's system was nominal, only 60 nanograms per milliliter. However, Rory Street's blood was drawn long after her death and potentially even longer after Rory actually ingested the cocaine. Therefore, this test may not represent the actual amount of cocaine that was in Rory Street's blood at the time of the incident or earlier in the day. And it is possible that the amount of cocaine in the system was actually much higher throughout the course of that day leading up to practice. Your Honor, and finally, we wish to read in a portion of a learned treatise pursuant to 803.18. With Your Honor's permission, it is Exhibit 20 in the record.
All right.
Heat stroke and heat exhaustion, unlocking the keys to the heart. Directing court and counsel to page 4 of Exhibit 20. Generally, exertional heat stroke, which is heat stroke brought on as a result of strenuous exercise or activity, does not result in death. Only 3 to 5% of exertional heat stroke can cause stroke cases result in death each year. Heat exhaustion and recreational drug use can work together to increase the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. For example, cocaine use can result in hypothermia, which inhibits the body's natural cooling process by constricting the blood vessels, clamping down on blood flow, and preventing blood from reaching the skin where it can be cooled. Thus, if cocaine use is combined with overexertion in extremely hot conditions, then it would only serve to exacerbate the risks associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke and could lead to a cascade of symptoms associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. With that, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Are we ready to proceed to closing arguments? Or do we?
Your Honor, we would ask for just a brief recess. Prior to that, we would also renew our motion pursuant to Civil Procedure 50A, Your Honor.
Overruled. Let's take a quick 5-minute break.
Yes, Your Honor.
Give you all an opportunity. I'm showing that plaintiff has approximately 10 minutes for closing, and defense has a little over 15 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is everyone ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. If any judge is not ready to proceed, let me know. Otherwise, we will proceed. Plaintiff, you may begin with your closing.
Thank you, Your Honor. On the Waco High soccer team, you don't stop when you're tired. You don't stop when you're sick. You stop when Coach Taylor says stop. On September 7th, 2018, Coach Taylor never said stop. On September 7th, when it was 105 degrees outside, when Rory had already done a full practice scrimmage on the field, had already run Burma Road on repeats, and when Rory had already been tackled to the ground 14 straight times in a row, Coach Taylor never said stop. Instead, she ordered that 15th tackle that robbed a bright young woman of her future. That 15th tackle that robbed Rory Street of the rest of her life. Now we're here today seeking justice for the tragic death of Rory Street. But it's important that we remember that we're in civil court today, not criminal court. This matters because nobody's going to jail here. Everyone we heard from today is going home to their families. Jordan Street is the only one who can't. But we're not asking you today to find Miss Taylor liable out of sympathy. No. You should return a verdict in favor of the plaintiff today because that is what verdict the law requires. Now, the law says that we had to show you some things to meet that more likely than not standard. First, we had to show that Miss Taylor owed a duty to Rory. Second, that Miss Taylor breached that duty of care. And third, that Miss Taylor's actions were the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. We have met that burden today. To show you why, let's walk through those elements one by one, starting with duty. Now, we had to show you today that Miss Taylor owed a duty of care to Rory Street to conduct practices in a reasonable and safe manner. And this element is pretty easy. No one here has contested that that duty of care existed. These children that Miss Taylor is in charge of, they're mostly minors, between 14 and 18 years old. Rory Street was just 18 when she died. These kids' parents signed them up for soccer practice expecting Miss Taylor, a coach with 26 years of experience, to take care of them. She absolutely had a duty of care to Rory Street. If not her, who? We have met our burden here, which brings us to our next element of breach. We had to show you that Miss Taylor breached that duty of care, and we have done just that. You heard today that conditions were harsh before anyone even stepped onto the field on September 7th, 2018. Even though their games were played at night when the air was cooler, Miss Taylor required her players to practice in the hottest part of the day. At 2:51 p.m. on that day, it was already 100 degrees. and that temperature continued to rise throughout practice. On September 7, 2018, it was up over 100 degrees as Rory Street stepped onto the field for the last time in her life. You heard that Coach Taylor, well, she attends coaching clinics all around the state to try to hear best practices, to keep up to date on the best techniques. You heard that one of those meetings that she attended, well, they talked about practicing in the heat. And specifically, they talked about practicing when temperatures reach 100 degrees or above. And you heard today that not only did Miss Taylor not follow those recommendations, she actually chose to ignore them. You heard that she didn't give her players a break every 15 minutes. And what's more, she didn't give them a break at all. Now, the defense tried to tell you that players could take a break whenever they wanted, that they always had water set up on the side and people just had to go over and grab it. Well, Your Honor, water on the side of the field doesn't do anything when you're afraid to ask for it, when you're afraid that if you complain, you're just going to get punished further. You heard about the conditions that day. It was hot. There were no breaks. There were no shade to rest off. The only people that told you otherwise were Coach Taylor, who's the defendant in this case, and Jess Merriweather, who is the youngest person ever to hold her position and only got there because of Coach Taylor. And she still works for her today. You heard that on September 7, 2018, when the star player was off her game, Coach Taylor didn't ask her if she was okay. She decided to punish her instead. She decided to punish her by making her run Burma Road, by sprinting for 30 yards, dribbling for another 30 yards, and then bear crawling on her hands and her feet all the way back to the beginning for another 60 yards. And not only did she have to do that one time, she had to, quote, do it until she passed out. And after Rory completed Burma Road, Coach Taylor decided that she wasn't done with her punishment for Rory. She decided to create a brand new, untested, and physically dangerous drill where Rory would be knocked to the ground over and over until Coach Taylor said that she could stop. In between transitioning from the first punishment to her last punishment ever, Coach Taylor never once gave Rory a break, or said she could get some water, or gave her a place to rest in the shade. Rory went straight into the slide tackling drill. Coach Taylor blew the whistle, and the players started running at Rory. And that first time Rory got slammed to the ground, you heard that Coach Taylor ran over to Rory, grabbed her by the back of her jersey, and yanked her off the floor, only to repeat the drill again and again. And Coach Taylor wasn't satisfied with doing this one time, wasn't satisfied with 5 times or even 10 times. You heard that Coach Taylor ordered these tackles 15 straight times in a row, something that an ordinary soccer player would never experience. And on that 15th straight hit, Rory did not get up. Now, they tried to say that these actions did not amount to a breach of duty because they're common. Just because these practices are not unusual does not mean that they're okay. Your Honor, we have met our burden here, which brings us to our next element of causation. We had to show that this breach of duty caused Rory Street's death. And that's exactly what you heard today. Now, you have in front of you Exhibit 16. That's Dr. Mcconaughey's expert report. And I want for you to look at his findings. His finding was that Rory Street's death was a result of heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke. What's more, in this very same report, Dr. Mcconaughey said with a reasonable degree of medical certainty that her death was not caused by cocaine. Now, we don't dispute that 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine were found in her system, but Dr. Mcconaughey even said that that is a nominal amount of cocaine, likely to not cause death. Now, the defense tried to dispute this by submitting their own expert report, that of Miss London. But I'd like for you to compare Miss London's CV with Dr. Mcconaughey's. Miss London has a bachelor's degree in toxicology. That's it. Dr. Mcconaughey, well, he double majored in biology and chemistry and then went on to medical school where he received an MD.
Counsel, you're
Sorry.
you've been in your closing for 8 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Mcconaughey is a board-certified cardiologist by the American Board of Internal Medicine and has over 20 years of experience in the field. Another doctor, the chief medical examiner for McLennan County, examined Rory Street. He found cocaine in her system and still did not attribute her death to cocaine usage on the autopsy report. We know that Rory's death was caused by a heat stroke. September 7th, 2018 was a tragedy. A tragedy that was preventable had Coach Taylor just acted as any reasonable person would. Had he just told the players that they could stop. We must hold Coach Taylor accountable for her actions. Find Coach Taylor liable. Thank you.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
The plaintiff is looking for someone to blame for the loss of her daughter, and that's understandable. It's hard enough to lose a child, let alone to accept that they're responsible for their own death. What happened here is a tragedy, but this tragedy is not my client, Coach Taylor's fault. Yes, my client had a duty to protect the health and safety of her players, and this was a duty that she takes seriously. She cares about each one of those students. But my client is not a fortune teller or a mind reader. She cannot protect players from what they do off the field and from what she doesn't know about. Miss Street made the choice to do cocaine before soccer practice and then made the choice to tell no one about that. Because of her own action and then inaction, Miss Street died that day. Now, in asserting this, the defense took on a burden which we have met. However, the plaintiff did not meet theirs. They were also required to prove their case by a preponderance of the evidence, and they have failed to do that. They've repeatedly pointed at Coach Taylor's drills and at her practice as being a proximate cause of Miss Taylor's death, but they have provided no evidence to say these drills are unsafe or that Coach Taylor failed to exercise ordinary care during her soccer practice. And that's because they can't. Now, you heard from my client and you heard her on direct say that she's an experienced coach. She's done this for over 26 years. And she was very open about the purpose for these challenging drills and pushing students during practice. If a player acts out or misses practice or shows up late, they have to be held accountable for those actions. And accountability comes in the form of drills. There are consequences for the players messing up during practice. These instill discipline and these help with teamwork. Just like in school, if you do something wrong in class, you get detention. Now, my client believes in pushing her athletes so they can reach their full potential. After all, this is a varsity soccer team. By its very nature, it is competitive. Students try out for this team, and they have to prove their worth on the team at every practice. And yes, Coach Taylor runs a tight ship, but it's what's necessary and effective, and you heard no testimony to the opposite. You even heard from the trainer, Jess Merriweather, that based on her knowledge and experience in the field of physical education and sports training, Coach Taylor's conduct and approach to discipline were not unusual. In fact, you heard they were orthodox in every sense of the word. And again, nothing the plaintiff brought you today proves otherwise. On September 7, 2018, Ms. Street appeared to not be playing to her full potential. Now, unknown to my client at the time, that's because Ms. Street had taken cocaine before practice. But my client had no idea about this. She thought that her star player was just being lazy during practice, which was reasonable to believe under the circumstances. So she had Ms. Street run Burma Road, what she's done many times before. And you heard today, it's a decades-old Waco High School tradition meant to discipline and motivate soccer players. A tradition that you haven't heard resulted in any other incidents like this. A tradition that even the coach herself as a player participated in. And that's because it builds stamina and character, and it helps with teamwork. And the plaintiff, again, has not proven that it is unsafe in any way. Now, when Burma Road appeared not to work with Ms. Street, Coach Taylor tried a slide tackling drill. And while this was a new drill, that does not make it unsafe. It was done on a soccer field with the supervision of my client and other trainers around. Now remember what my client said. She admitted that yes, Ms. Street was struggling, but that's what you do during soccer practice. But she never showed signs that she was struggling to the point of needing medical attention. My client monitored that situation throughout the practice. Ms. Street wasn't sweating more than any other player. And as to her falling down, well, that's a part of this soccer drill and of soccer in general. Now, instead, the plaintiff put Ms. Street's best friend, Aubrey Saracen, on the stand today, who quite frankly has a grudge against my client who took away her starting position this year. And she told me there were visual symptoms that she saw Ms. Street wasn't doing well. But think about the inconsistency in what she said. A day after Ms. Street died, Ms. Saracen said that she just collapsed out of nowhere on the soccer field. Now today at trial, Ms. Saracen is claiming that she'd been worried about Ms. Street throughout practice. The two just don't add up. And that's because she knows, like you know, that cocaine killed Ms. Street that day. And that's important because it shows that my client wasn't aware that Ms. Street's struggles on the soccer field that day were related to cocaine in any way. Now, you heard from our expert, Mr. London, a toxicologist. Even if she had these symptoms, they are all consistent with cocaine use. Now, unfortunately, my client didn't know that her player had chosen to take drugs before practice. And unfortunately, Ms. Street never told anyone about that. Neither of those two things are my client's fault. Now, Coach Taylor explained to you why she always has a trainer like Ms. Merriweather at every practice, whose whole job it is to tend to injured players and make sure they are safe and healthy on the field. But Your Honor, this is a two-way street. The players have their own responsibility to keep themselves healthy and safe as well. If they feel faint, unwell, uneasy, anything, they need to let someone know, whether it's a coach or a trainer, anyone on the field. Ms. Street told no one that she was feeling unwell at practice that day. You heard that on the plaintiff's case and you heard it on our case too. You cannot expect to be helped if you pretend that everything is going okay. At no point did Ms. Street ask for a break, ask for water, or even say, you know what, coach, I have cocaine in my system. I need to stop practicing today. Because if she'd alerted anyone to the fact that she was on drugs, Ms. Street would not have been allowed to continue practicing or doing those drills. That is why Ms. Street and her consumption of drugs is a proximate cause of her own death. Now, you've heard a lot about the weather that day, and we know it was over 100 degrees, but this wasn't the first hot day in Texas. Your Honor, Ms. Street has practiced in this heat many times before, and she's never collapsed or experienced seizures. This time was different. This time, she had cocaine in her system. A substance you heard from Mr. London makes it difficult for the body to cool down. And it makes it more prone for someone taking cocaine to be subject to heat stroke and heat exhaustion. And that's why Miss Street died. Nobody, especially not my client, stopped Miss Street from taking a break that day. Despite what the plaintiff may want you to believe, there's no mandated break time for high school soccer practices. Instead, you heard from both my client and the trainer, Miss Merriweather, that players are allowed to grab water whenever they need to and as often as they need to. So breaks are essentially constantly allowed, let alone every 15 minutes. And yes, there is one official break per practice, but if a player asks for water, they get water. If a player tells someone on the field they're not feeling well, they can stop practicing. Miss Street made a decision to take cocaine before that practice, and then she made the decision to not tell anyone about it. Now, the autopsy you saw today doesn't list soccer drills as the cause of death for Miss Street. She died of a heart attack, the cause of which was undetermined by the medical examiner. And remember, the defense had to bring in the autopsy and the toxicology report on our case in chief because the plaintiff didn't want you to see that. And that's because the toxicology report proves that Miss Street had cocaine in her system that day. This is yet another reason why the plaintiff has failed to meet their burden in this case. Now, you heard some other things from Mr. London today. You heard that cocaine can cause heart attacks. It can also cause heart swelling, which was found during Miss Street's autopsy. This makes it harder for the heart to pump blood around the body and beat regularly. Your Honor, it's a simple proposition. Cocaine kills, and it killed Miss Street on September 7th. Now, you heard the plaintiff argue today that because there were nominal amounts of cocaine found inside Miss Street, that means it didn't cause her death. Well, being a habitual user of cocaine is not what's necessary for cocaine to kill you. Our expert explained why there were nominal amounts of cocaine to begin with. You heard that her blood was drawn at least a day after she collapsed on that field. And it's possible that the amount of cocaine in her blood was actually much higher when she was running around that field in over 100-degree weather doing those drills. But more importantly, Mr. London told you that any cocaine in her system was enough to cause her symptoms and to cause her death. Now, Your Honor, we don't know why Miss Street decided to take cocaine before practice that day. Maybe it was due to the stress and the pressure that she felt that Aubrey told us about during her cross-examination. But her actions in taking that cocaine and her inaction in telling absolutely no one about that is the reason she collapsed and died on the soccer field that day. If Miss Street had decided or chosen to tell anyone, even a teammate, what she had taken before practice, none of us would be here today. Now, we can all wish that would have happened, but it didn't. Miss Street's actions and her inactions are not my client, Coach Taylor's, fault. The only person negligent on that faithful day was Miss Street herself. As such, Your Honor, we ask that you put emotions aside in this case and take a look at the facts. The facts show the plaintiff has failed to meet their burden, and we have met ours. Cocaine killed Miss Street and not soccer. As such, we ask that you find Coach Taylor not liable for the death of Rory Street.
Rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. May I ask how much time I have remaining?
I'm going to give you a little leeway, 2 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Your Honor, Texas has the 51% rule. That means you're allowed to have doubt. You're allowed to have 49% doubt. So long as you find that Coach Taylor was at least 50% responsible for what happened to Rory on practice that day. And we've done much more than that. Miss Taylor was the coach. Miss Taylor was the adult. Miss Taylor was the trained professional. And still, the defense is putting the burden on a scared teenager to create safe practice conditions. Don't let them. Hold Coach Taylor responsible for her actions so this doesn't happen again. Find her liable.
All right. At this time, the court will take matters under advisement, asking the scoring judges to submit their scorecards. If everyone will still stay in the meeting until instructed otherwise.